Oh dear, there's stuff everywhere. Hello, hello. Let's see. Lest you ever think that I will be a professional, I am currently balancing my phone on top of 3 jigsaw puzzles using a loose leaf tea bag. So, God forbid I treat this, like a job. Okay. Kiersten, my love. Thank you. Okay, there we go. Light and joy. Here we go. Kiersten!
Hey!
Hello. I was just saying, God forbid I treat this like a professional. I am genuinely balancing this. Like, I'm actually going to show you. Like, it's 3 jigsaw puzzles and a single loose leaf tea bag.
Yeah, you know, it's a good setup. It's a good setup.
How are you, my love?
I'm good. You know, like, don't you always have to like think for a minute, like, how am I? But right now I'm good. How are you?
Oh, you know, it's the world. It's the world. Yeah, it's the world. But I'm happy to be chatting with you. I'm bummed because normally I have a glass of whiskey and I'm doing another event after this, and I guess I should be like sober. And so this is a giant glass of water in the largest tea mug that you have ever seen.
Oh, see, I went classy. I poured my Dr. Pepper in a really nice glass.
Ooh, it's elegant. Look at us and our elegant beverage.
So elegant.
I'm so happy
grown
to
ups.
get to do this. I'm so
Me too.
happy.
I miss you.
I
miss everyone.
Yeah. Well, I miss most people, but I definitely miss you.
That's true. Yes. You are on the list of people that I miss.
Yeah. I miss, like, I was thinking about it. I had something the other day. Oh, I took a shot of something called cachaça, which is a kind of alcohol that I found in the back of my cabinet because I didn't have any more tequila and I really needed, it was a day. I needed something.
Yeah.
And I was like, my mom was like, where did you get cachaça? And I was like, oh, I had it when I was on tour in Brazil. I had a caipirinha. And then I was like, oh my God, I miss going places.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm wearing like, I got this ring in Mexico City and I was like, Mexico City. A place that isn't here.
A place that isn't my home. I mean, I'm very fortunate. Like I know Danielle's in the comments and she's giving me grief for drinking straight cachaça, but you know, it's surreal. Like, I'm very grateful to be here, but I also didn't expect to be here where I am for like 5 months.
Yeah.
And that's what it's going to be. And so I'm like very lucky, very fortunate. It sucks because I'm an American living abroad. And so I feel in some ways really distanced from things.
Yeah.
And I hate that because I have to find other ways to advocate and other ways to be involved that are less tangible and less immediate than I would like.
Yeah.
But I'm also very lucky to just like, I came here to be with family.
Yeah.
And also for people asking, yes, No Right Way is normally on Saturday, but it's on Sunday because the United States had a holiday yesterday and I was trying to be amenable for everybody. And we're also at a different time. So it's just me trying to confuse everyone.
It's good. It's good.
Yeah.
Oh, and I have that screen time limit on my phone and it just gave me a warning for 5 minutes on. So if I get kicked off, it's because of that and I'll be right back.
Okay, I was gonna say, you'll pop right back in. It just is trying to help you. It's trying to save you from yourself.
It's trying to save me from myself. At this point, it's probably the same as like when your computer's like, will you please update today? Please? Yeah. Anytime today, please? And you're like, maybe tomorrow. And
I haven't updated in like 700 days. So I just refuse.
Yeah.
I just refuse. But we're here to talk about you and your amazing work. And just really kind of break it down because you are one of the most not only prolific, but I don't want to say crazy because that's like pejorative, but like the way that you write is a lot. And I feel like you'll be the first to talk about how unconventional some of it is.
Yeah. Yeah.
So yeah, we're going to talk about that. But first, like, I want to start this the way I always start it, and then we'll go our own way. But like, could you just give us the origin story for like, how did you become like prolific, amazing, best-selling author Kiersten White. Like, where did it start? Like, how did we get here?
Yeah. So I'm one of those. I always wanted to be a writer, but like legitimately, I still remember in first grade we had a career day, and all the girls were supposed to cut out nurses, and all the boys were supposed to cut out firemen. So we'll unpack that later. But I raised my hand. I was like, "Can I leave the hat off of mine because she's not a nurse. She's a writer and a mom."
And were they just like, "Oh no"?
They were like, "Oh, you're so cute. Yes, you can do that."
Yeah.
And then some other girls copied me, and I was like, I left the hat off my nurse first. Anyway, I was a jerk. And so, yeah, I always wanted to be a writer. It was always what I was going to do. But it took me a really long time to give myself permission to fail. I didn't write my first book until after I graduated from college, because once you actually start, it goes from, oh yeah, I'm going to be a writer, to, oh, I'm actually doing it. And if I fail, then this thing that I've had in my head since first grade, this thing I've been telling people forever, this big part of my identity and my idea of who I am and who I'm going to be is wrong.
It's that lie that you tell yourself. It's the reason lots of people never start, right? Because if you start, you have to finish, and if you don't finish, then quote unquote you failed.
Exactly. So if you always have an idea for a book, or you're going to write a book, then you can never fail, right? Because you've never started.
That's why a lot of people out there will write a book, quote, one day.
Exactly. So I wrote a lot of poetry in high school. I took one creative writing class in college, but my degree was in English literature with an emphasis in editing. And then I graduated from college, had a baby 2 weeks after my last final. She's 16 now. And then we moved to San Diego for my husband to go to law school. So I was at home with this beautiful, terrible baby. And babies are awful. Babies are, anybody who's like, oh, babies are such a wonderful thing and you should enjoy every moment, like, clearly doesn't remember what it's like to have a baby. Babies are nightmares. They're beautiful, incredible, miraculous nightmares. They're awful. And
you now have how many?
Oh, I have 3.
So I mean, it's not like you stopped. Like, you weren't like, I'm out.
It was a worthwhile investment. We'll just put it that way. So my husband was like, you should just start writing that book that you've always talked about. And so I really needed something that was mine to like reclaim some part of my brain. And so I did. I started writing that book. It took me about 2 years. It was a middle grade. It was genuinely terrible, but I did it.
But first books are supposed to be bad.
They're supposed to be bad. So whenever I meet a debut author, they're like, oh, this was my first book. I'm like,
but also then most of the times they say that they've done something else, like either they've written for papers or they've written a lot of fan fiction. And I'm like, you have to count those in your education.
Yeah.
Oh, hold on. There you go.
It was my
it was your screen time. Was
had too much social media. This doesn't count. It's hanging out with a friend. So I mean, the book was terrible, but it taught me that I could write a book from start to finish. And
it was middle grade.
It was middle grade, because I actually started out wanting to be a middle grade writer, but I'm sure middle grade is much harder than YA. It's way harder than YA. So I switched to YA, and that's where I got an agent and eventually sold. And only now, 10 years into my career, am I finally like re-embarking in a meaningful way on middle grade, just because like it's way harder.
So was Paranormalcy your second book, or?
Paranormalcy was my 4th.
Oh, okay. Because I feel like
so I wrote a middle grade, and then I wrote 2 young adult novels. I got an agent for the first one. And then I immediately wrote a sequel, which, pro tip, don't do that. Don't write a sequel to a book that hasn't sold yet. Because the first book didn't sell, and then I just had 2 books that wouldn't sell. And then I wrote Paranormalcy, and that's the one that sold. So, I mean, I've written...
And that was what year?
It sold in 2009, and it came out in 2010. So this is like the 10th anniversary summer. I can't
believe you're a year older than me in publishing.
Yeah. I mean, it feels like we're almost exactly the same.
I know.
Just because once you pass 5 years, like, you're Methuselah.
Yeah. If you can survive 5 years in publishing, like, it's this exponential curve into the negative. Like, I always call it the publishing mortality rate, which sounds terrible, but it is. Like,
and it's true.
It's hard. Terrible. I'm the old person. I am the crone now who, when I see a debut, I'm like, I'll check back in 5 years, just because like it's a hard, and also like it's not just like, part of it is that publishing is terrible and hard, and the other part of it is that like a lot of authors discover that like as much as they love writing, publishing isn't for them, or they can't cut the business side of it, or they, you know, you write in the safety of your privacy until you sell a book, and then you write in a glass wall where everyone has feelings. And it can be really rough, but we've both been in it for a long time. And you're how many?
I think my favorite 16. So 17, 17 comes out this fall. 18, I'm in the process of editing. So 16. But
Kiersten, we have the same number of books out.
That's wild.
Like
Addie is do so much more than
Addie's my 17th, and it comes out in October.
Yeah, so we both have our 17th out this fall. That's so wild to me, because I feel like you're so much more prolific than I am.
No, I just waste a lot of time.
You get these ideas in your head. I'm always like, it's like Schwab is doing so much more than I am. But
no. It's that I still take like between 1 and 10 years to write a book, and in that time, you've written like 16. Like, you're so insanely fast. Do you have a percolation time then? Do you have like a time that you sit with an idea?
Oh yeah. Most of my ideas, I'm not sitting down to write them until I've had the idea in my head anywhere from 6 months to 5 years. Like, and I'm not actively working on them. I'm not taking notes. I'm not like, but it's just, I do this thing where I retreat to stories in my head. I've done it ever since I was a kid. It's an anxiety coping thing. Sometimes it's healthy, sometimes it's really unhealthy, you know. You know how it goes.
I get it.
And you get it. And so usually, very, very rarely will a story start the day that I sit down to write it. Usually it's a combination of stories that I've been telling myself for a long time, or an idea that I've had that I wasn't ready to write yet. But almost always it's after at least a few months, if not a few years of it being kind of back burner, simmering somewhere in my head until I'm ready to tell that.
So here's my question, 2 parts, is like, what's the shortest that turnaround has been, like where you got the idea and you sat down and you belted it out? Which one?
So I would say either The Dark Side of Blues with Frankenstein, because that one, actually, my editor came to me and said, have you ever had any desire to write a Frankenstein retelling? And as soon as they said that, I was like, yes.
And it's so good.
I love that book so much. And so they asked me to do that in February. So I spent a couple of months rereading Frankenstein, deep diving into the life of Mary Shelley, deciding what I wanted my retelling to be. And then I think I had a finished draft, I want to say like July. Probably the weirdest one, though, was the Guinevere Deception, because they gave me a blank book deal for that one. It was just 3 a fantasy trilogy. And I was kind of trying to decide what I wanted to do. I was like, I want to do an Arthurian retelling. And so all I pitched was, I want to do an Arthurian retelling centered around Guinevere. And they were like, okay. And so I had some ideas of like how I wanted it to feel, but I didn't have any plot. I didn't have characters. And with that one, I really just sat down at my best friend Stephanie Perkins' house and started writing on like page 1. And 7 days later, I had a finished draft. So that was
I find when the faster I draft, the longer I spend in revision. But do you feel like, because I feel like some people, like a lot of people in the comments are like, oh my God. And I'm like, we do have to remember that like usually we eat it on one side or the other. Like 100%. If we take a couple years to write, it's usually a pretty fast revision. And if we take a couple months to write, then it's a long revision.
So to contrast that, the Anti-Darken books took me a long time because it was a ton of upfront research and outlining. And I mean, like a couple years worth of research. And so those ones, the drafts took me a lot longer, but there was pretty minimal revision and editing. Whereas the Guinevere Deception, the first draft was 65,000 words and the final draft is 100,000 words. So it was like 2/3 of the book.
Yeah.
A third of the book happened in edits, and pretty extensive revision. So yeah, so it's a toss up. It's like I either write a very fast, fully immersive first draft and do a lot of work on the revision end, or I do a lot of upfront work and have less work on the revision end. But you're always, the time and the work is always going to come in somewhere.
Exactly.
Like, there is no
pay for it. I do wonder though, do you find that is there like a similarity? Like, is it books which are very voicey that you feel like you dive into, or were the plot like, do you feel like there's a common factor among the books that you write fast besides publishers expecting please deliver?
Well, I don't know what the common factor is.
Or is it just where your head
in part, it's really where my head is. I wish that I could schedule it, and it's always first books. It's never a second or a third book in a trilogy.
That makes
always
me feel
taking
better.
longer because no, second and third books always take me way longer because the first book is all like potential and wonder and exploring the world and building, and books 2 and 3 are like, okay, I have all these rules I have to play by.
What amazes me though about your speed is I find that the first 100 pages of a book take me like 5 times longer than the last, like than the rest, because like the world building and the rules and stuff. So the idea of having any speed whatsoever in that first 100 makes me so jealous, because for me it's like this, I'm a car stuck in mud that's like trying to get momentum to get out of the hole, and then I'm fast. So you don't have any slow parts in that draft?
No. But the thing that gets me is I do a lot of the world building and a lot of the character work on the second draft, because I am just sort of barreling through chasing the story, and sometimes I get to the end of the story and I realize like character motivations or traits or things in the beginning of the book don't make sense with where I ended up, and so I have to go back and refine. I sort of discover the world as I'm building it, so there's then a lot more like on the back end of like, okay, I have these aspects that I like, how can I develop those in interesting ways? The one thing that does get me is I'll get really into an idea and I'll get really excited and I hit 20 or 30,000 words, and unless I just keep going, I'll stop. Like I can't tell you how many drafts, how many like partial books I have that are 20 or 30,000 words, because that's the point where it becomes real, and it's no longer just like, this setup is so interesting and I like this character, they're very intriguing. It's like, oh, this is a real story.
There's a reason that's like the shiny new idea syndrome kicks in at roughly the 30,000 word mark or the 100 page mark, and it's because this thing you didn't know was like really sexy because it was very mysterious, and then in order to write a book though, you actually have to become well acquainted with the story, and the more acquainted you become with the story, the less shiny it is, because the less mysterious, the less potential energy and the more kinetic energy. And it's so hard to keep yourself writing when it becomes overly familiar to you, because like that's the necessary parts. The reason so many people don't finish books that they start is you have to push through the shine wearing off, and then some new mystery comes along, a new book, and it's like, play with me instead. But if you follow that book, you're gonna hit the same problem 30,000 words in every time.
Yep. I mean, I would make an analogy to dating, but I haven't dated since I was 18. But
we'll come up with a different analogy.
But no, that's exactly what it is. It's like suddenly it's a real thing that requires work, and it's not just, this is so much fun. So, and I think that's where you get authors versus writers. I'm going to write a book someday.
Yeah, of course. It comes in at the discipline of being able to push through the part at which it's less interesting to you than it was before, because that less interesting is really your brain just being like, but I get it now. I know it.
Okay, and speaking of discipline, and I know that I said this to you, but like I cannot tell you how like personally and professionally inspiring I find The Immortal Life of Addie LaRue, because I still remember so vividly. Let me tell this story. Victoria and I were at a writing retreat in Branson in February.
Oh my God.
And it was like the worst writing retreat ever. It was doomed from the start. The person who organized it gave me the wrong dates. And so I got there 2 days early to a snowstorm in Branson, Missouri. I was in like a discount hotel that didn't have room service. The only place I could walk to was a pizza place. So I bought myself 2 large pizzas, and that's all I ate for 2 days before the rest of the people came. And then like, it was you and Beth Revis, and was it Carrie? No, it wasn't Carrie. It was Rachel.
Yeah,
right?
Hawkins.
Rachel Hawkins. Yeah, so we weren't even in the main house. We were in this like creepy
were
apartment above the garage.
It was weird.
It had like a curtain over the bathroom. Like that was it.
Super sketchy.
It was anyway, and I remember at night we're all laying there in our like weird pull-out beds in the garage annex, and you told me about your idea for The Immortal Life of Addie LaRue. And I loved it, obviously, like even just the idea, I was like, yes, oh my gosh. And I had just read The Near Witch and like was blown away by it. And then you didn't write it, and you didn't write it, and you didn't write it. And so I just kind of thought like, oh, I have so many ideas that I love, but then I try them and they don't quite work, or I'm not ready for them. And then you did write it.
Yeah.
And it's done, and I've read it, and it was just like astonishingly beautiful and incredibly crafted. And like that, at this stage in our careers, that means so much to me that like you did it. You did it.
Well, but the only reason I did it is because I genuinely got to the point where I thought, oh my God, I'm going to die without ever writing this one. And I've told so many people about it. That's going to be really embarrassing. But no, I really, really appreciate that, because as someone who struggles with like expectation and with fear and how hard it can be, especially to write a story like Invisible Life of Addie LaRue, where it's very different from my other books. And so I had a lot of fear. And that's something I want to talk with you about. It's like your books span so many genres and stories and vibes, and I love that about them. And but like it can be really scary when you step off a path that you're confident in, and stepping off of like Shades of Magic into Addie LaRue was just like, what am I doing? But I had to exorcise it because I was so nervous about. And then honestly, it's so hard because I'm so proud of it, but it was probably the least pleasant of any of my books to write, because it was so fraught. And like, this is a weird thing to compare it to, but I compare it to like a weed that has like really deep roots, in that like getting that weed out of my brain, it was so, because it lived there for so long, so entrenched. Like it was not it was about a year and a half that I was actually drafting it, and it was the most unpleasant mentally. Like my mental health in that year was so bad, because I just thought, I'm going to disappoint everybody. I'm going to disappoint everybody in my entire life with this, like every day. So thank you.
And like, and it's such a good example to me too. Like, because I always kind of had this mindset of, well, if I start something and I don't finish it, I never go back to it. And I did this last year. There were 2 things that I had started and I had to set aside for various reasons, and I went back to both of them, in part because of Addie LaRue. I was like, if he can do it, I can do it too. Like I can pick something up that I thought my brain wasn't in anymore. And I finished both of them, and one of them will never be published because it was, you know, it didn't end up being what I wanted it to, but I proved to myself that I could finish it. And then the other I actually wrote during this quarantine period, and I won't say anything more about whether or not that'll be a book.
But that makes me so happy, because I do, like, I'm of 2 minds, right? I firmly believe that everything that we abandon still teaches us something. So like,
exactly,
the writing itself is like, oh my God, I'm becoming very, very aware of the number of metaphors that I use in these chats, because apparently I love one, but I'm thinking of like, a knife sharpening tool. Like everything that all the writing that you do sharpens the tool that you have. So nothing is ever wasted, but, so it's okay if you don't come back to projects, but I think that there can be so much value in revisiting the center of a concept, maybe not the writing, maybe not the plot, but the seed at the center of it that like your interest, and then asking yourself why. Like the very first book I ever wrote when I was in college never got published because the plot was terrible, and it was like it would never work. Interestingly, all of the reasons that publishers cited for why it wouldn't work, I'm now using in the book that I'm writing now, because I'm like but there was one element at the very center of this book I wrote when I was 19 that I couldn't stop thinking about, and I plucked it out like 3 years ago, and I wrote City of Ghosts, like using the seed at the center. So you just never know, but I'm so proud of you.
But I'm the same way. Like, I feel like no writing is ever a waste. Like, I've totally cannibalized failed books for parts. Like, okay, what did I, you know, that book as a whole didn't work, but what did I love about it? What drew me to it? Like, and then I'll take that and I'll incorporate it into something else. So yeah, it's one of those strange careers where not everything is going to work, not everything is going to sell, but
Yeah.
I genuinely, like, even if I spend 6 months on something and then it falls apart and it's not going to sell, like, I don't feel like that's a waste. I don't feel like I've wasted time because, you know, either I had fun or I learned something, and I'm going to take that into whatever I do next.
And ideas really are like phoenixes. Like, there's always something at the center that you can pluck out and like can rise from those ash. God, I've got to stop. I'm so sorry. I'm at my metaphor limit. There are no more metaphors today. But okay, so I want to talk a little about process. Obviously, we've hinted at the fact that you have written some books very quickly. But I want to know, aside from the sheer manic momentum of creativity, like what do you feel is your thing that you love most, and what do you feel is your creative kryptonite?
I love that high of chasing a story. Like when you get that spark of an idea and the characters start talking to you and you have those incredible moments where it feels almost more like you're channeling it than you're writing it. And you know, those don't happen with every book even. But you know they're there. And I think that's my favorite part. Like I feel like, especially drafting, I get such a high from drafting. But I also really enjoy revision because I really like taking this like raw material and pulling out the story that always had the potential to be there, but I'm not there yet.
Yeah.
The things that I struggle with detail-oriented work. So like world building, I struggle with like, especially world building over the course of a series. I have to keep reminding myself of the same things. And I really like, I admit, I hate detail work in writing too. Like my critique partner, Stephanie, is always like, what are they wearing? What does the room look like? What are they eating? What are the smells? And I'm like, I don't care. Let's have some dialogue.
Yeah.
And like those scenes are always, and it's what I admire most in other people's writings, like when they have such a vivid sense of the world, because that's not something that comes naturally to me. Dialogue comes naturally to me. Plot comes naturally to me, but that type of descriptive work doesn't. And so whenever people are like, oh, I really like felt like I was in the world, I'm like, I worked so hard for that, thank you.
You should seriously
so
play with,
that's
you should do script work, because then it's like all dialogue and like construct. It's just plot and dialogue, dude.
I really should. But I'm worried if I ever let myself do that, I will never go back to writing books.
Sure. I've spent the last 6 months on script work instead of a book, out of the sheer fact that it's less daunting. Because you're like, they're just talking.
If you're talking, I can have conversations for days.
Now, do you write linearly?
Yes. So this is where your process like blows my mind.
Yeah.
I start on page 1 at the first sentence, and I write in complete linear order until the end. And every single edit that I do, I start at page 1 and I go to the end. Even if it's like just a middle part, I will always start at page 1 and go to the end.
I'm so impressed.
Well, but part of why I can draft fast is because, like, let's say I'm 2/3 through and I realize I need something to happen in the first third that doesn't, or something happened in the first third that contradicts that. I'll just make a note to myself and say, this happens now. And I'll continue drafting as though I had written it that way.
That's so smart.
Yeah. I mean, and I totally get when people can't do that. But for me, that works to just sort of like put a pin in it, make a note to myself saying, okay, now it actually happens this way. So in the next draft, I'm going to change that. And then I continue writing as though I had already changed it.
That's so smart, because like, one, I'm obviously incapable of this, but I also like, I think of those things a lot as I'm going. Cause I would say like I write completely out of order until about halfway. I have about half the material and then I start stitching everything. But like once I realize I have a problem, I have to go back immediately and trace it all the way through. But like, I think that's such a smart, and anyone who's watching this should listen to you and not me, because like that is so, because think you're not interrupting any of your momentum. I always wonder how do you do this and keep going forward knowing that something's different, but you're playing it out moving forward, just not backwards.
Exactly. Like I make the note, I pretend in my head that I already changed it, and then I move forward as though I had already changed it. And so that way too, when I do the edit, like if I have some continuity issue, it only exists in 2/3 of the book and not the whole book. Which is a lot to hold in your head, which is again why I always write it down. But yeah, for me, drafting is entirely about momentum. I have to have momentum. If I lose momentum even for a couple of days, like I might quit. Yeah. And I don't say that facetiously, like I might just quit writing that book.
Do you have a notebook and stuff, or are you working across like multiple things? Like what is your setup?
I just use a laptop. I use Word on my laptop. So I'll have like my draft going in Word, and then I'll have another document open for like editorial notes, or sometimes I draft in Word and I plot in a notebook. I really like, somebody was asking what notebooks
I was gonna say.
I really like they have these really cheap moleskin basic notebooks that they don't have nice binding. They're really thin. And like, I don't feel bad writing in those. I buy myself beautiful notebooks, and I feel anything I put in them has to be beautiful, but these are the most bare bone, basic, cheap ones. Yeah. And so I don't feel bad writing in them. And those ones I actually fill up. And so I will kind of like plot maybe like, here's what I want to be in this book. And then I'll sit down and write it. And as I'm going, I'll say, okay, at this point in the book, I need these 3 things to happen. So I'll write that down. And so I kind of plot as I go along. Usually just a few scenes ahead at a time, where I have like the overall arch of the book in my head, and then I'll plot, like do like chunks of plotting as I go. And then editorial notes I almost always do in a Word document, just so that it doesn't get lost in my scribblings about like, here's a snippet of dialogue that I want to use, or here's a scene that would be cool. So it's all in Word.
You are playing with creative fire. Word is the only platform that consistently crashes and doesn't autosave within the last like 2 minutes. And the number of times I have lost like 500 words, 1,000 words in Word.
That hurts.
It hurts. It's broken me. It's broken me.
I mean, I shouldn't even say this. Like, knock on whatever material this cheap desk is.
Don't even say it. Don't even say it. I know what you're about to say. Don't even say it. We don't play with the creative gods by saying when we haven't lost things.
I will continue to make my offerings on the altar of Word.
Exactly. We don't play with that. So do you have a different notebook for each like, because we talked about the back burner, this idea that you're mulling things. And like, I find that half the reason I'm able to not follow the shiny new idea is because I have like a drop folder where I just like drop ideas that are half baked, and like, I'm like, not today, Satan, and like leave them there so that I don't follow them down their path. Like, because you've got back burner ideas, and I know that you have a lot of different things going in the back of your head, like, do you have systems of organization, or is it all wherever it goes?
I'm so chaotic. Like, I hate myself for it, but I'm so chaotic. Like, I'll be like, wait, I had that middle grade plotted out. I know I did such a good job plotting it. I had pages and pages and pages of notes. I have to find the notebook that I was in. So like 50 notebooks later, because some are on my nightstand and some are on my bookshelves and some are like in a drawer somewhere. I find the notebook and I have 2 pages.
I have been that person.
Yeah, and it's like fragment sentences that make no sense. Like, what if the inner tubes weren't? And you're like, what does that mean?
Every year, I think I'm going to be better. But like, I don't even have folders within my documents on my computer. It's literally just like random. I don't even title them properly. Sometimes my computer glitches. It doesn't add the date right. So they end up like 2 years back in the folder. And I'm somebody who is as likely to scribble on a piece of receipt as drop myself an email. So then I have to go through this deep system of, did I send myself an email with this thought? Did I put it in the notes folder on my phone? Yes. Is it on an actual piece of paper? And in the end, you're just like, you try to be very like Elizabeth Gilbert about it, where you're like, it'll come back to me if it was meant to come back to me.
Yeah, it's true. Or I'll just, and I have so many documents on my computer. Like the other night, I'm trying to fall asleep, and suddenly Lucy Westenra and Dracula are having a conversation in my head, and it's a really good conversation. Yeah. And like, I'm not planning on doing a Dracula retelling, but it was a really good conversation. Yeah. And so I'm like, I can't fall asleep right now until I like purge this from my head. So I ran downstairs and opened up my computer and like typed out the conversation
Yeah.
And then I was able to, like, because it's like physically out of my head, I was able to close it and then fall asleep like 2 or 3 hours later. So it worked out.
Yeah,
but yeah,
that's
like
evil. The before
yeah.
bedtime thought is evil. And also for anyone watching, highly recommend if you keep your phone next to your bed, which you probably shouldn't, like drop something in Notes app, because your handwriting legibility at like 2 a.m. is not what you think it is. You'll wake up at 8 and be like, this says calcimesna. And you're like, what is calcimesna? And like, I like have lost the ability. So I end up typing with like one eye open on my phone at 2 a.m. and then just hope that I could go back to sleep afterwards.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's
It's true. But I think, yeah, I think like physically, especially where we do always have things on simmer, I think physically putting them outside of your head helps you stay focused. And it also gives your brain that reassurance of like, this isn't going to be lost. It's there waiting if we ever want it. And assuming we can find it the day that we decide we want it, which, that's the question, isn't it?
So I always feel like when I'm writing a book, I don't know if you feel this way, like I'm trying to keep 150 plates spinning in the air.
Yes.
And like, I can't rest until I get all of the plates safely onto the ground. So I'm like continually kind of freaked out that I'm going to forget something, that I'm going to drop something, that I'm going to mess something up.
Yeah.
And sometimes I find I just need to like open a blank document and drop like a bullet note plot list of like, here's everything that's going to happen before the end. And exorcising that information from my brain makes it feel less like I have to hold it aloft.
Yeah, exactly. And that's why I always do those sort of like, here's the next 3 scenes. It's the barest outline. It's really not any information except telling my brain, we got this. We're not going to forget it. Like, it's right here. So yeah. So you're a very prolific writer. You write fairly continuously throughout the course of the year, correct? I feel. No. Or do you take months off? Oh yeah. I'll do like a huge burst where I'll just be totally lost in a project and I'll be working on it every spare minute. And then if I don't have a deadline, or if I'm like waiting for edits, I will go 2, 3, 4 months without writing anything. I'm not a write every day type of writer. Yeah, I'm very much like a burst writer. And so I'll have like a creative burst. I'll generate a ton of material. And then, which actually, works really well for me, except now my husband is working from home too. Yeah. And I'm like, oh, he's going to realize just how little I work daily. Over the course of a year, I work a tremendous amount, but any given day.
Yeah. So what do you, aside, you've got like children, you've got a lot of things to do, but what do you do to refill your own creative well? Like, how do you balance? Where's the self-care come from?
I just like consuming stories. I like consuming them everywhere, like music. Like I'm all about albums, not about individual songs, because I like to hear the story that a band builds with an album. And I'll get obsessive. Like I'll listen to the same album like 40 times in a row. Yeah. And then like reading outside of things that I write, especially, is the most important thing for me. I watch a ton of television and movies, and normally I would say travel, but that's off limits right now. But yeah, for me, it's about allowing myself to enjoy story as a consumer. Yeah. And it inevitably sparks something, because I'll really connect with a story, or I'll like the way that I'll like the feel and the sense of a story. And I'll realize like I have that itch again, like, oh, I want to create something again. So
what have you loved recently?
Oh gosh, I loved, I just finished Watchmen, which I thought was brilliant.
Bit timely.
Yes, and timely. And it was funny because I just watched it now. So the whole masks thing, and we wear masks to stay safe. I'm like, that must have hit differently a few months ago, because now I was like, yeah, of course we do. And then oh gosh, what else? Like I really love adult horror. I find I can really just enjoy it. I find it very soothing. And of course, now that I'm talking about it, I can't think of a single author or something that I've ever read. Yeah. But it's been good. And then there have been some really, really good teen offerings, I feel like, on Netflix recently. Yeah. I really loved Lock and Key. Did you watch Lock and Key?
I still haven't watched it. I feel like I need to, though, because I'm looking for a new binge show, and I just caught up on Castlevania, and I just am like, where is my next Netflix binge going to come from?
Yeah, I really like Lock and Key. I thought the family dynamics were really interesting, and it was a story that did a good job of every age level had something important to do.
Yeah.
Which is hard to pull off. I feel like Stranger Things does that well, where like every age level has their thing that they're doing that's important, but also age appropriate for how old the characters are. And then I know that it had issues, but I really love Never Have I Ever.
Yeah.
And then I loved what was it called? The Half of It.
I love that.
But
I watched it with my family.
Yes, it was so sweet and so sincere, and I really liked that it took its time with things, like that it had scenes that existed just to have the scenes and to have these like quiet moments of beautiful connection. Yeah.
And I also just think it's so important. Like the reason we need more and more queer narrative or any marginalized narrative is because it allows it to not feel like a monolith. And like when you only get to have one or two representations of an identity, then they have to essentially be put on pedestals and perform a specific function. And I know some people felt like there was a lack of resolution in the Half of It, but that's what I loved, because like it doesn't always have to be straightforward. And like the amount of depth and diversity that we give to straight white narratives, like I want to see that afforded to other narratives. I want to be able to have as much nuance and as much complication, and getting to see like, you know, kids exploring their identity and getting to know their identity. Like you don't suddenly figure it out. Like I've talked about this a lot, but I'm 32 and 364, 365th or whatever. And like you're always figuring it out. And when we create an idea, or when we put forward the message that like you just know, and you have to know every single point of your spectrum, like, no, you don't. Like, no, you just have to be you.
Yeah, I mean, who I was as a teenager is a world away from who I was in my mid-20s, is a world away from who I am in my mid-30s. And like, I have so much compassion for the versions of me that came before, and the things that they thought they had to be. But it's a learning process, and like, and I try and really emphasize this because I have teenagers now, and I always try to emphasize like identity is fluid, and you know, maybe you find labels now that fit and they make you feel seen, and that's amazing and wonderful. Maybe you don't have those labels yet, and that's also okay. Maybe you find a label that makes you feel seen and validated now, and in 10 years it's no longer who you feel you are, and that's okay too. Like those can change too. And so well,
and
so
it feels like these days there's so much pressure for teenagers to like not only identify, but to basically like know who they will always be in addition to who they are now. And that's like, I'm so grateful. I mean, I was terribly closeted in my teens and didn't understand anything, but I also like, thank God I didn't have to pick a label in my teens for who I would be at 33, because like, it would have been so limiting and also just a lie. But I just think it's important to give that space. And so seeing stories like the Half of It, where you're like, oh, like it's discovery and it's understanding, and I want more of those stories. I want more stories that don't have to function in one exact lane of identity. Exactly. Now you're making me want to rewatch. Now I'm like always looking for binging, and so thank you for these offerings. So moving forward, so coming out this fall is the second book in the Camelot series, right?
Yes. Yeah.
And it's remind me of the title, because Guinevere just.
So it's called I have it right here.
I was gonna say bring it out.
For something else from a Comic-Con panel. So it's the Camelot Betrayal.
These covers are so beautiful.
They're so good. Right. My cover designer is Regina Flath, and she found an artist that she went to art school with, Alex Dos Diaz, and they're so stunning. So that's the middle book in the trilogy. Comes out 5 days after the election. So
great. We'll all need escape. So it's wonderful.
Yeah, we'll all need escape. And you know, as my editor put it 2 months ago, she's like, well, at least November is nicer than March now, huh? And I was like, oh gosh, yes, those poor people.
I know. It's a lot. I mean, I've got a book coming out in October, and I'm freaked out every single day. But...
And then so right now I'm working on I'm helping a friend with edits for her book, and then I'm deep diving into edits for book 3, which is the end of the trilogy, and I'm excited about it. Like it's I love ending trilogies, because it's like,
so what you're working on the third book though, like timing wise, when you've worked on third books and trilogies in the past, like how far, how am I trying to say this? Like the hard part of writing series is that they're being received as you're still writing the series. So how do you manage that? And how has it felt while finishing a series while people are reading book one and then book two?
Yeah. It's always interesting because people start coming to you with the things that they loved and the things that they hated and the things that they hoped for. And in a lot of cases, you've already written it. And so these things that they're hoping for, you're either like, you're going to be so happy, or like, oh, I'm so sorry. But I think my dream scenario is to be able to write an adult fantasy series and write the entire thing before the first book ever comes out.
Oh God,
because
that would
then,
be a luxury.
Right? It would be such a luxury, and you could make the whole thing so cohesive because you wouldn't get to book 3 and book 1 is already published, and so you cannot change details, and so you have to work with what's already there.
Yeah.
Which is fine. It always works, but I'm always like, wouldn't it be amazing if you could just craft and shape the entire thing before any of it ever comes out?
It would be wonderful.
Yeah, but my very first trilogy, I did have some panic moments when the first book came out and people were like, I love this thing. And this thing was a sparkly pink taser. They loved the taser. They were obsessed with the taser. And so I had this panic moment of like, oh, the taser isn't in book 3 enough. So I actually added more taser action in book 3 I don't know. But after that experience, I was like, that was really silly. Like that I had a panic moment that like, there isn't enough of this sort of anthropomorphized taser that has a name, and it's really just a taser. And so I really try to hold on to, what I want the series to be. And this is not to say that I don't value feedback or reactions of readers. I absolutely do. But in the end, my goal is not to craft an ending that makes everyone happy. My goal is to craft an ending that when you take the series as a whole is a satisfying ending, a satisfying conclusion for both the characters and the narrative. And that's not always a happy ending. Like the Anti-Darken trilogy, I never cared if the ending was happy. I cared if the ending was satisfying. If the ending felt true to these two characters and a journey that they went on over the course of like 330,000 words. And so that for me is really what I try to focus on, is crafting an ending that I find, as both a storyteller and someone who loves stories, to be satisfying.
Well, and that's also it's not disrespectful to readers to say that. The reason being that, and you know this, I know this, for anyone who doesn't know this, like whatever is one person's favorite element in a book is somebody else's least favorite element, is somebody else's totally feels blasé about. Like, we can't write for everyone. We can only write for ourselves, because trying to write for anyone else, trying to please everyone, ends up pleasing no one. Whereas at least when we're writing for ourselves, we know that we'll be happy with it. It's like a complete fool's errand.
And you have to have integrity as a storyteller. Like, I feel like the books that I've written that haven't worked in the most spectacular ways, and I mean, these weren't even published, they'll never be published, is because I was trying to write what I thought that I should write or what I thought people would want. And it doesn't work. It just doesn't work. And so it's a lesson that I've learned over and over again. It's like, you have to do that. You have to tell stories with integrity, and that have a heart. Because if you're just telling a story because you think like, oh, this will sell, it doesn't have a soul. It doesn't have a reason for existing other than to be a product. And like, we know that our books are going to turn into products eventually, but they shouldn't start that way.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Okay. So the question, we're winding down, but I can't wait to ask this question. I love asking this question when the author I'm interviewing has a large canon. The way that I end these interviews is by asking, basically, we create a lot. And while we certainly have stories that speak to us more than others, we also don't have the luxury of getting to decide which of our books is the most popular. It just doesn't work that way. I'm always amazed when the books that are most popular don't line up with the books that I thought would be. But I want to know, if you could only choose one of your books to outlive you, just one, which would it be and why?
That's a hard one.
Right?
I mean, could I pick? Because like if it's a trilogy, then I would pick. Could I pick a trilogy?
I will let you
like,
pick a trilogy.
Okay, because I feel like if you pick like the first book in a trilogy, then that's
Yeah.
like,
No, we can pick a trilogy.
I would pick the Anti-Darken trilogy,
Really?
because I that was the hardest thing that I've ever written. I think it's the best thing that I've ever written. It might be the best thing that I ever will write. Like, and I know that seems bad to say at this point in my career, but like, I think I genuinely accomplished something with that series. I'm so tremendously proud of it, structurally, and the story that I told, and the way that the first book and the last book are mirror images of each other that balance on the middle book. Like, it's, I think I would pick that one to outlive me. Yeah. But, you know, let's again in 20 years and see how we feel.
Well, and that's the thing, right? Is like, I ask it because the only time in my life I've ever had a moment where I thought if I never wrote again, I'd be okay, was right after I finished Addie. And it only lasted a few days, but it's still like, I'm something I'm now intensely curious about. Yeah. And that also gives anyone who's watching this who hasn't read your books yet a perfect place to start. So go pick up Anti-Darken. If you haven't, pick up the Guinevere Deception. Second book comes out, The Camelot Betrayal.
Yes, Camelot Betrayal comes out in November.
It's perfect timing. Kiersten, you are wonderful. I can't wait until I see your face in person again, but I am just so happy that I got to talk to you and see you on screen.
Yes, I miss you. I adore you. I'm so proud of you and happy for you.
Thank you, love. Thank you. And I hope I will see you soon.
Yes, I hope so too.
Thank you, everybody, for tuning in, and have a wonderful rest of your Sunday.
Bye, guys. Thanks.